All right, time to write some more code. The last program that we wrote, it actually was the first program. But anyway, the Hello World program that we wrote was a very simple program where all we did was print Hello World on the screen. Let us do something more with Java and in the process learn more about data types, variables, and literals. This video will primarily set the base for discussing data types, literals, and variables in detail. These three topics are intertwined and it will be hard for me to explain and possibly even harder for you to understand them in isolation. And that is the reason we will discuss the basics, taking all of them into consideration. Think of this video as the big picture view, which will give you an idea of how data type, literals, and variables work together. Then in the next three videos, we will zoom in on each one specifically and talk about each of them individually. Now, I could have put all of them in just one video, but that would have made the video very long. And that is why I decided to set the base first and then go for detailed discussion of each of these topics. With that clear, let's discuss the goal for this video. The goal for this video will be very simple. By the end of this video, we will aim to understand how data type, literals, and variables work together, but we won't rely just on the theory. To make it easy for both of us, for me to explain and for you to understand, what we will do is we will write a very simple program that will add two numbers and print their sum. And using this exercise, we will aim to understand how data type, literals, and variables work together. So let's get started. Now, if I ask you to add two numbers, say 10 and 20, what would you do? In the context without a programming language, you would probably write these numbers on a piece of paper and then perform the addition and then give me the final result, which is 30. However, if you were doing this using a programming language, say Java specifically, how would you do it? Well, the first step is simple. The first step is to create a class called sum. For that, what I will do is I will right click on src, then select new and then select Java class, and I'll type the name as sum. Now over here, we know what to do next. We need public static void main because as we have discussed already, the main method is the entry point of the program. So let's do that quickly. Now, one way you could do that is you can type in public static void main and all of it. The other way would be to just type psvm. It will give us a suggestion which says main method declaration. And if I press enter, you can see that it auto completed and it has put the main method inside the sum class. Now, once we have a class, the next step would be to have two numbers and store them somewhere. Given that we are talking about a programming language, we won't write the number on a paper to store it. We will use computer memory. To do that in Java, we will type this statement. We'll say int num1 is equal to 10 and we will end this with a semicolon. What this will do in short is it will store 10 in memory. Now in this one statement, we're doing quite a lot of things. We're creating a variable called num1. We are specifying that this is an int variable and we're also assigning 10 to num1 with the help of the equal to operator. More on each of this in a moment, but before that, let's understand with the help of a very simplified diagram what this statement does behind the scenes. When the Java program is compiled, we get a .class file given that there are no errors in the code. When we execute the .class file, the JVM launches. It requests memory from the operating system and the operating system allocates the requested memory to the JVM. Later, when the program is executed and this statement is encountered by the JVM, it will allocate a portion of the available memory, store 10 there and assign it the name num1 so that you can access it later. Think about it this way. In a hostel, there are many identical rooms. Each room is assigned a room number, say room 101, 102, etc. Let's say you want to meet your friend in a different hostel building, and for that, you need to tell the security guard the correct room number so they can send you to the correct room. If you do not know their room number, would you be able to go straight to their room and meet them? In Java, memory is like that hostel building. The JVM has many identical storage rooms, and we give them names like num1 so we know exactly which room holds which data, and it's easy to find and use them later when needed. Now, this is a very simplified but still a correct visualization of how values are stored in memory in Java and a name is assigned to it so that we can access them later. Continuing, let us understand this statement, that is int num1 is equal to 10 better. Here, int is one of the data types available in Java. Now we are going to discuss about data types in detail in the upcoming video, but just to give you an idea, Among other things, data type is used to specify the kind of data that the variable can store. Now, if you're wondering what a variable is, in this statement, num1 is a variable. We will get to num1 and understand about variable as well. But for now, let's just focus on int. The int over here specifies that the variable it is associated to can store integer values, which means say 10 minus 43 or a larger value, for example, 109743,659 or something like that. Now, we had earlier discussed that we will need to store 10 in memory, and then we also discussed how can we do so, which means this statement entirely is storing 10 in a memory location and assigning that memory location the name num1 so that we can access it later. Which means when we create a variable which is num1 over here, it will occupy some space. Now, the amount of space that a variable will occupy depends on the data type to which it belongs to. Over here, num1 belongs to the int data type, and int data types occupy 32 bits of memory or 4 bytes of memory. And an int variable is capable of storing numbers between this and this. Now, I'm not going into the specifics of why the least number that an int variable can store is this, and the maximum number that an int variable can store is this. But if you're interested, please let me know in the comment and I'll create a separate video explaining this. Now, let's focus our attention to num1. As I've mentioned already, num1 is a variable. And if you have watched the video where we talked about identifiers, we had discussed that identifiers are used to name things, one of which is variable. So all the rules that apply to an identifier applies to variables as well. Now, if you're not familiar with the rules that apply to an identifier, you can check the video where we talked about identifiers. You can find that video in the same playlist as this one. Continuing, variables are the smallest unit of storage in a Java program. Lastly, let us talk about the equal to 10 that you see over here. Over here, 10 is a fixed value that is written directly in the code. Such a value is called a literal. Also, over here you can see equal to, and this is one of the many operators that Java supports. A dedicated video on operators is coming soon, so stay tuned. Continuing, int num1 combinedly indicates that we have a variable called num1 which is of type int, which means num1 is capable of storing values which falls in this range. So with this, we have stored one of the two numbers that we need to perform addition. And since we already know how to store a number in Java, let's quickly store the second number as well. Now, let us create another variable. Let's call it num2 and let's assign it the value 20. So we have two variables in the main method. Both of them are of int type. The first one is named num1 and the second one is named num2. The first one holds the value 10 and the second one holds the value 20. Now, if you're wondering why did I not name this variable as well num1, that is because the compiler will throw an error and it says that the variable num1 is already defined in the scope, which in short means that you already have a variable called num1 and you cannot define another variable with the same name within the same scope. We're going to talk more about scope later on, but long story short, within the same code block, be it the main method or something else, you cannot have multiple variables with the same name. So let's change it to num2. Now, all that we are left to do is find the sum of these numbers and store it somewhere, after which we can print that value. So since we have got two integer numbers, when we add them, we are going to get an integer, right? And what we want to do is we want to add them and store it somewhere, which means we'll need to create another variable. So let's say the name of that another variable is sum. And since we're going to store integer number, let's say int sum, and let's put a semicolon at the end. With this, what we have done is we have just created a variable called sum and we have not assigned any value to it. Now, what value will we assign to sum? We will assign the sum of the values in num1 and num2. Now, to find the value, we will have to say num1 plus num2, and we will need to put a semicolon at the end. Now, we are getting an error, which we will talk about in a minute. But taking a look at this statement, you might have guessed already as to what it is doing. It is taking the value that is stored at the location, which is named num1, which is 10, and taking the value which is stored at the location named num2, which is 20, and with the help of the plus operator, it is adding them. So it will give us 10 plus 20, which is 30. Now, before we assign it to sum, let's talk about the error that we are getting here. If we hover on this, it says not a statement, and then it is suggesting to introduce local variable. So we are performing some operation over here, which will give us a value, but we need to assign that value to some variable, which is something we are not doing right now. So to do that, what we can do is we can cut this statement from here and we can go to line number 6. Then we will have to delete the semicolon here. Then we will need to give an equal to and paste the statement that we had cut. Now what's happening is num1 plus num2, which is 30, is being assigned to sum with the help of the equal to operator. And sum here is another variable of int data type. Another way this could have been done is you could have declared sum over here. And in the next line, you could have done sum is equal to num1 plus num2. And that would have been correct as well, because as you can see, there's no error right now. Now, all that we are left to do is print the value that is stored in the variable sum. And we already know that we can do so with the help of the system.out.println. So let's type that statement out. But as we are in an IDE, let us use the autocomplete feature of the IDE. For that, I'll say S out and I'll hit enter and it will autocomplete. Now over here, the last time we printed something was hello world and we had printed it this way. So if I run the code now, it is going to print hello world, which is not something we want, right? What we want is we want to print the value that is stored in sum. So if I replace hello world with sum, will it work? Let's find out. So if we run the code now, let's see what do we get. We get hello world, and that is because in the run/debug configuration, hello world is selected. So if you change it to current file, it will always execute the current file that you are in. So let's do that and let's run the code again. And now we are getting sum printed, as in not the value that is stored in the variable sum, but sum as a text, which is not something we want. And that's happening because we have put it inside a pair of double quotes. And as we had discussed already, almost anything that we put inside the pair of double quotes will get printed. So we'll have to type sum, but without any double quotes. In that case, what system.out.println will do is, because sum is a variable, it will print the value of the variable sum and it will give us 30 as an output. So let's find out if it works that way or not. Let's run the code and we get 30. Output correct, goal achieved. So summarizing, what we did over here was we created a variable called num1 and mentioned that this variable is of int type. Now, when we say int type, we automatically attach a lot of attributes to it. For example, it takes 32 bits or 4 bytes in memory, and it has got certain minimum value that it can store and certain maximum value that it can store, and that there are certain operations that we can perform on them, etc. Then we declared another variable called num2 and we assigned 20 to it. The next thing that we did was we created a variable called sum, and in a separate line altogether, we assigned the sum of values in num1 and num2 to the variable sum. Now, this is not mandatory. You can do that in the same line as we have seen. And the last thing that we did was we printed the value that is stored in the variable sum. Oh, and we also discussed that 10 over here and 20 over here are called literals, and that equal to is an operator, and that plus is another operator that Java supports. Now, what equal to will do is it will assign the value on its right to the variable on its left. And that's what happened in line numbers 3 and 4, and also in line number 7. To the right, we had one single value that we got by performing addition on the values in num1 and num2, which was 30, and it got assigned to sum. I hope I've been able to give you an insight into data types, literals, and variables and how they work together. However, int is not the only data type in Java. There's more. Similarly, there's more type of literals and there's more to talk about variables, which we will do in the next 3 videos, which will get uploaded in 1 week's time. For these and other videos, stay tuned. So that is all for this video. I hope I've been able to teach you something new and useful. If you have any suggestions, feedback, or queries, feel free to put them in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.